Well, good evening, everyone, and it's right on 7 o'clock, so I think we'll make a start. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's meeting of the Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee. I'm Councillor Cynthia Garton, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to the meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined this application. Or these applications, I should say, as we have 3 this evening. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, then do please let us know so that we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. When the red light is amber, they have 30 seconds remaining. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Right, okay then. Let's start with item 1, and that is apologies. Catherine, do we have any apologies, please?
We don't, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2 is Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Corben.
I think we may have standing apologies from Tim Bearder.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, item 2 then, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interest as they occur to you in the meeting. Yes, Councillor Gomer.
As you probably noticed in the report, I have an interest in item 10, the planning application at 8 Chapel Close, because I live next door, so I will make myself scarce.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. Right, I don't think there are any others. So we will now move on to item 3, which are the minutes of the meeting on the 13th of June 2022. That seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Right, I'd like to sign the minutes of this meeting as a true record. So can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Gomer. Seconder, Councillor Kyrle. Thank you. All agreed? Have a show of hands, please. Thank you very much. Anyone disagree? Or any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Welsh. Right, item 4. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor. Right, okay, thank you very much. Right, item 4 is public participation, and this evening we don't have anyone to take part in that particular item on the agenda. So, moving on, we'll go on to item 5, which is the Chair's report. Hatch Farm. At the last local area committee meeting, I reported that work had started on the wheeled sports area on the Willows development at Hatch Farm. I'm very pleased to say that that work on the facility has largely been completed now, and our younger residents are enjoying using it. Plans are afoot to hold an event to celebrate its opening, and details will be shared with the local community in due course. Hedge End Way Play Trail. I'm also pleased to say that the new wooden play trail at Hedge End Way has been installed, and having visited it myself, I can wholeheartedly agree with the feedback that has been received. This is a fantastic new facility that will be greatly enjoyed by the children in our community. Shamblehurst Lane to Tollbar Way Bridleway. Recently, the council's street scene team have carried out work to reopen the bridleway between Tollbar Way and Old Shamblehurst Lane in Hedge End to enable horse riders and walkers to use the bridleway safely. While some additional work remains to be completed, the bridleway is now looking great, and I hope the horse riders will enjoy using it. Itchen Valley Country Park. That's recently been awarded the Keep Britain Tidy Charities Green Flag for a 13th year. A great achievement. This award is a nationally recognised mark of quality, and it reflects the hard work and commitment of the team at the park in ensuring the park is well maintained, has excellent facilities, and is professionally managed. The £3.3 million programme of improvements will continue to improve this wonderful park for current and future generations. Hedge End Green Routes. The Wayfinder sculptures that have been designed and handcrafted by a talented artist blacksmith are soon to be installed in 3 locations in the Grange Park, Dowds Farm area of Hedge End. The sculptures, funded through public art contributions from local development, will help walkers navigate through the local path network and encourage people to take green routes rather than more urban routes, supporting their health and well-being and enhancing their enjoyment of the local environment. Work started on the groundworks last week, and the installation of the Wayfinder sculptures is due to take place later this month, obviously depending on the weather. West End Heritage Markers. Residents of West End should also see work commencing on the installation of the West End Heritage Markers soon. These double-sided markers have been created to celebrate notable people from the history of West End and will be installed in 3 locations along the West End High Street. These attractive sculptures have been funded through public art contributions from local development and will enhance the local environment for residents and visitors to West End. And finally, community grants. The local community and youth grants scheme opened on Friday the 7th of October and will run until the 18th of November this year. The scheme provides an opportunity for charities and not-for-profit making organisations in Hedge End, West End and Botley to apply to the local area committee for grants for up to £500 towards one-off projects, equipment and individual events. Organisations can apply until the 18th of November, and all applications will be considered by the local area committee in January. Thank you. Right, so now we will move on to item 6, which is the local area manager's report. So I'll ask Kitty Budden to introduce the report, please. Kitty.
Thank you, Chair. The local area manager's report for October, there are two short items on the list. Borley Park Mugger, so the multi-use games area. Ball stop netting has been installed at the Mugger in response to issues being raised by residents nearby. The netting raises the height of the fencing along the western edge of the Mugger and will help to reduce the likelihood of balls being kicked over the fencing here. West End Village Centre public realm improvements. The Council's construction and maintenance team have carried out some initial improvements to West End's High Street to improve the appearance of the area, with new bins being installed and unnecessary signage and tree guards being removed. Other opportunities to enhance the appearance of the village centre are currently being explored. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Does any member have any questions on that report? No? Okay, then we will just note that. Thank you. Right. Item 7 is presentation of planning guidelines, and I'd like to invite Claire Martin to give the presentation, please. Claire.
Thank you very much, Chair. Planning applications must be considered on planning grounds, and the committee must determine proposals in line with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan comprises the policies of the adopted Eastleigh Borough Local Plan and the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. Also of relevance are the Council's supplementary planning documents, and these include documents such as quality places and residential parking standards. Also of relevance is government policy, most notably the National Planning Policy Framework. Development also needs to comply with the Conservation of Habitats and Species regulations. Other considerations to take into account as planning history, previous appeal applications or decisions, site-specific policies and site-specific matters such as highways or residential amenity, consultations and third-party comments, and case law. Items that can't be taken into account include moral, racial or religious views, devaluation of property, loss of a private view or breach of covenant, matters relating to other laws and legislation such as building regulations, personal views about the character of an applicant, or civil matters such as boundary disputes. Finally, there are two different processes that planning applications can go through. The first is a one-step process where all matters are considered and it's called a full application. And the second is a two-step process. The first application submitted is an outline application which considers the principle of development, and then the second application, reserved matters application, and this covers all details not approved at the outline stage. So it covers access, layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. Right, so we'll now move on to the first application on item 8, which is the planning application for Holly Tree Farm, Maddoxford Lane, Botley. So I'll ask Claire again if she could present her report, please. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. The application site at Holly Tree Farm, it's an outline application for the construction of up to 221 dwellings, a scout hall and associated infrastructure, with all matters reserved apart from access. The application site covers 10 hectares of mainly fields on the eastern side of Botley Green, located in a stretch of countryside between the end of Botley Green and the start of Curdridge. The application site is in the south of Maddoxford Lane, past the new junction with Wallace Avenue. To the north is the outer edge of the Botley Park housing development, and to the immediate east is the new development for 72 dwellings at Oak Ridge Farm. This plan shows the site in a little bit more detail. The grey area shows the Botley Green settlement boundary, and as you can see, the site lies outside of this and is almost completely surrounded by countryside. The site itself consists of 3 fields which are gently sloping. The only existing development lies to the northeastern corner of the site and consists of 2 residential properties, a car park, scrapyard and associated outbuildings. The land to the immediate northwest of the application site has been allocated for approximately 30 dwellings. No planning permission has been secured on this site. However, there was a planning application for 92 dwellings on the allocated site and the neighbouring field. This application was refused and later dismissed on appeal, with the principal reason being that part of the site was within the countryside. Next, I've included some photos of the application site. The first is taken from the footpath looking into the field where the housing development is proposed. The second photo shows the crops that were previously being grown in the eastern field, and the third photo shows the pasture within the western field. As you can see from the photos, the site boundaries are tree-lined, and the trees also partly separate the different fields. The next set of photos shows the development within the northeastern corner of the site. The first photo is the existing single-lane access from Maddoxford Lane, which serves the development site. As you can see, the area around the access is heavily treed. The second photo shows the existing dwelling at Holly Tree Farm, which is located close to the site entrance. And the third and fourth photos show the open storage area and outbuildings at the site. Next, I'm going to briefly run through the site constraints which are referred to within the committee report. The blue line shows the route of the public footpath. The footpath uses the site access, travels through the developed part of the site and then runs off between the fields. The footpath is part of a wider network of paths that connects Maddoxford Lane to Botley, and it is the County Council's aspiration to upgrade the route from footpath to bridleway. Another constraint are the existing utilities that run through the site. Next to the northern boundary is a power line and underground water pipes. Along the western boundary is a gas main, and any development would need to ensure that the necessary buffers were in place to prevent damage to these utilities. On the eastern side of the site, there is a site of importance to nature conservation, which is marked as zinc and shown in green. This area is also on the banks of the River Hamble, so much of it is within the floodplain. There is also a further sink just outside the site's southern boundary. Therefore, any new development would need to be set in from the boundaries so as not to damage the sink or important trees. Finally, there are 2 heritage assets close to the application site, which are shown in yellow. The first is High House, which is locally listed to the north of the site access. The second is a collection of Grade 2 listed buildings at Newhouse Farm to the south of the site, just further along down the footpath. Here is the illustrative master plan, which has been submitted with the outline application. Although this plan is only illustrative, it demonstrates one way in which the 221 dwellings could be fitted onto the site. As you can see, the development has a single access point at the northeast side of the site. Next to the access is the scout hut and one of the play areas. You can see that the existing footpath has been diverted slightly, so it now runs around the edge of the houses. The housing development is divided into 2 main pockets which reflect the existing field boundaries. The majority of the dwellings are 2 or 2.5 storey, although there are a small collection of 3-storey blocks in the centre. The committee report explains why officers consider that the site is not able to accommodate this number of units, which I will briefly summarise. Firstly, we consider that the housing development comes too close to the site boundaries, and there are examples where the houses encroach into root protection areas of important trees. Another issue is that part of the development is within 20-metre buffer for the sinks, and this includes part of the 2 attenuation ponds, the eastern play area, the pumping station and the access road. Therefore, the development would likely harm the sinks. Furthermore, the eastern attenuation pond is close to the River Hamble floodplain and could therefore prevent the sustainable drainage system from effectively working in times of flooding. A further issue is the planning application does not demonstrate whether the attenuation ponds are of sufficient capacity to provide a sustainable drainage system for the whole of the development, and so may require further land than that shown on the plan. There are also a number of design issues with the development, and these include examples where the dwellings are too close to each other and do not meet the council's separation standards. Some of the dwellings do not have sufficient car parking spaces, and one of the 3-storey blocks, which is just over here, is completely surrounded by roads. The proposed play areas are too close to the dwellings, and the proposal does not include any informal recreational space. There is also limited space provided along the main access road or the smaller cul-de-sacs for worthwhile tree planting. Another concern are the 2 suggested site access points on the western boundary, which are required to provide pedestrian and cycle links through to Botley Green. Both these access points go through the site boundaries, which have the potential to harm important trees. It's also questionable whether these links could be created, as the southernmost access point would need the landholder's permission to link to the neighbouring housing development, and the northernmost access point would be through an allocated housing site. The allocating site has no planning permission and so may not come forward in the short term. Instead, residents would have to walk along Medoxford Lane, which does not contain any pavements for the full length and is unlit. As such, the site would not adequately be served by sustainable transport. This slide shows the details of the proposed site access, which is to be considered as part of the outline application. The top photo shows the current single-lane access into the development, and the bottom photo shows the rough position of the new access, which is located slightly further east. The plan on the right shows the route of the new access, which will be widened to 5.5 metres to allow 2-way traffic, and a separate footpath created next to the access road. The proposed footpath is only 1.5 metres wide on the plan, and this will be needed to be widened to 3 metres to enable it to be used by both pedestrians and cyclists. As mentioned previously, this part of the site is heavily treed, so the proposed works could result in significant tree clearance. There are no updates on this planning application, so I'll move straight into considerations. In terms of the principle of development isn't acceptable as the site is located within countryside. It's considered also that the nature and location of the housing development would have an urbanising impact on the appearance of the site, public right-of-way and surrounding land. In terms of the site itself, it is agricultural land, and it would result in the scheme would result in the loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land. In terms of access and highways, it hasn't been demonstrated that proposed access would meet highway standards, or that the traffic movements could be accommodated without interfering with the safety or function of the highway network. It's also unclear whether the proposed pedestrian and cycle links to the neighbouring sites can be delivered, without which the development would be poorly served by sustainable transport links. In terms of the amount of development, the indicative layout fails to provide sufficient development-free buffers, and so would likely have a detrimental impact upon the sinks, important trees and public utilities. We also have an issue with the quality of the development, as it wouldn't meet the council's necessary standards. In terms of drainage and flood risk, insufficient information has been provided to demonstrate that the drainage system has the capacity to serve the development, and the development does not provide the required 3 forms of naturalised filtration. The proposal also fails to show how the development will be protected from flooding. And finally, in terms of ecology, the proposal fails to provide the biodiversity net gain required, and therefore it's unlikely that this can be achieved on site given the amount of development proposed. Therefore, the recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons set out within the committee report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire, for that very comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Right, so we do have some speakers on this application this evening. And the first speaker we have speaking in objection to this application is Councillor Colin Mercer, Chair of Botley Parish Council. Councillor Mercer. And as you are speaking on behalf of Botley Parish Council, we will give you a bit longer.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say it's very nice to be able to get back to some normality, or even more normality. I would like to let the council know that Botley's neighbourhood plan has now reached regulation 14, so it does now, in the sense that the parish council has approved it. So it does carry some, albeit a small, amount of weight. I asked a little drawing to be circulated in there, and a significant part of the objections which I support, which the parish council supports by the borough, is based on a policy S5, which is countryside. In our neighbourhood plan, we believe we need this strengthened to become based on policy S6, which is a settlement gaps. Because if you look at the map, there is no protection against, or no protection against further work, I understand, is going to take place in Kirdridge. And we definitely do not want Botley Green to become amalgamated with Botley Village. So we would like to move, we have gone for the stronger settlement gap policy rather than the slightly weaker countryside policy in that, and we would ask you to take that into consideration, that we would really do not want these houses there. Of course, if someone was to offer to plan a scout hut, we would probably support it in there because it's a different sort of facility. We did note, did an analysis of all the people who are in favour and all those who were in favour of the development, and did note that many of them lived further away. And I think that probably indicated that they were in favour of the scout hut rather than the other parts. It's maybe a cynical view. That's all I have to say, Madam Chairman. Thank you on this thing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mercer. Our next objector is Roger Han. Roger, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm also a Botley Parish Councillor, but I'm here this evening in a private capacity as a resident of Botley Green. Anybody that's been to Botley Green recently will have seen the level of development that's already going on, and frankly another 221 houses is not really required. There are several items which concern the residents of Botley Green, not least traffic levels, sewage capacity, access to public transport. I really just want to concentrate on the traffic situation. Your officers have already highlighted several reasons why this proposal is not desirable. But one thing that wasn't mentioned was that where that access road comes out, I hadn't realised until Claire mentioned it that it's even further east than the existing access into that. That brings it even closer to a very narrow bridge, which is wide enough only for one vehicle at a time. So if you've got 221 houses, which based on what I understand is the recognised average vehicles per house is about 500 vehicles, which at some point or other are going to be emerging from that development onto Maddoxford Lane, which is at that point very narrow. There's a very narrow bridge which runs into Wangfield Lane. This clearly is not a situation that can be allowed to take place. There clearly is a traffic problem in Botley Green already, and we are talking to Hampshire County Council about trying to alleviate some of the problems that we have. This further 221 houses and the vehicles that would be associated with them would only add to that. Because I have a limited amount of time, that's the main issue that I wanted to bring up. It's the main issue that is of concern to Botley Green residents at this moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Han. Now, we do have the agent with us this evening, Daniel Wiseman, who is going to speak in support of the application. Mr. Wiseman, thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you. Ordinarily, when I speak at committee meetings, I am able to stand here and say how we've worked with your officers to refine an application to make it acceptable in all respects. I'm not going to lie to you, I can't do that today. So although I'm speaking in support, I'm actually telling you I agree this application is not capable of your support. The application hasn't been amended at all since it was first lodged earlier this year, and there are some areas, as you've seen, that require some attention. We did, and still do, want to bring forward a suite of amendments, but your officers explained they did not want us to submit amendments at this time, and we completely understand that position. Instead, officers asked us to withdraw the application and to lodge a pre-application and discuss those proposed amendments. Naturally, we would prefer this application to be deferred to allow us to bring forward that suite of amendments, including, not exhaustive, but an alternative access location, a reduced number of dwellings, a lower density development in those parcels themselves, more open space, a larger green wedge on the eastern side of the site, increased biodiversity net gain, a potential mix of uses which we hope you would find quite interesting, and of course a lot of technical details as requested. However, if you are unable, and again I understand if you're unable to defer the application and if you want to make a decision today, we reluctantly accept the refusal. I can reassure you though, we have no intention of lodging an appeal. That's not why we want the refusal. We merely want the refusal so the applicant will have 12 months from the date of decision within which to lodge their second application, one with zero fee. If we were to withdraw the application, which your officers requested, and normally we would do that, we would have only 12 months from the date submitted, which is back in April. That would give us until April next year to submit those amendments. So for us, that's crucial because we want the time to bring forward meaningful design changes and to have enough time for pre-application dialogue with officers and community consultation. So our intention, openly will say, is to submit a pre-application later this year with consultation in February, March, and an application in the summer of next year. That's what we would like to do. We'll be very happy to work with yourselves, with your officers, and with the community to bring forward what we feel are much-needed new homes in a sustainable location. We are in absolutely extraordinary times. We've got a chaotic government that wants to throw the planning system out the window. We've got rising inflation, cost of living, mortgage rates skyrocketing, and a deep recession on the way. We really do need more homes in the borough, with more competition between those house builders to drive down prices. And we do need sites to bolster the local plan, and I accept there's a review that will be underway soon. So I believe in this site. As a scout leader, and there are some around the table that know how much we need youth facilities in the borough, but I reiterate that the landowner and the applicant wants to work with everybody to bring this site forward, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions you may have. So thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wiseman. Did you want to come back on anything? No? Okay, right, thank you. Well, members, we are looking at the application that we have in front of us this evening. I'll now open it up to councillors just for questions only before we move to debate. Does anyone have a question, councillors? No? Okay then. So can I have a proposer to move to debate, please? Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
we don't have a process that requires a vote to move to debate. It's just part of the council standing orders. We move into debate as a matter of course. I don't know where this suddenly came from the last meeting. No other area committee has done this.
Okay, well, this is what I'm given by
You've been given
Democratic
valid advice, I'm
Services,
afraid.
so
Yep.
I'm only following what I'm given.
No, sure.
Okay?
We've been doing this for 26 years now, and
Okay.
this has not been part of the council's process.
Okay, fine. All right then. Thank you very much then. In that case then, we'll go into debate. Thank you, Councillor House. Any? Yes, Councillor Kyrle.
Thank you, Chair. Well, where do you start with this one? I read the report at great length. Had to go back and read a couple of bits actually on it because I couldn't quite work out, was it really as bad as what I was reading? And what I was reading was that it's awful, this application. There is the only glimmer of positivity I could find in this application was the fact that it would provide a scout hut, which clearly could be, again, as the report says, sited somewhere else in the borough or somewhere else in this area, on another site, or and the removal of the unauthorised scrapyard, which surely we should have really been doing probably something about through the planning process, unless we already have been. I don't know. Perhaps we have. But that absolutely is no justification whatsoever for bringing this very awkward site, which is slap bang in the middle of the countryside. It's not a sustainable proposal whatsoever. It's a car-borne, isolated proposal, which is not linked or connected or even proposed, frankly, to be connected, or any agreement in place to be connected to any other development. So there is absolutely no throughput whatsoever of other sustainable modes of transport other than driving onto a narrow lane close to a bridge, as is being pointed out by Councillor Han, which is close to a national speed limit, close to a one vehicle width ancient bridge, which has sustained damage in the past due to larger vehicles speeding and trying to get down there, etc. There are significant concerns and issues around coalescence. We're very close to the border with another council, which clearly developers no doubt would be looking at with envious eyes to be able to say, oh, well, you've got development outside of the boundary, we'll develop the other side as well. It's a chancer application with so many holes in it that clearly what would happen if it did go to appeal, and I understand that the agent, as representatives, has said that we wouldn't be going to appeal, but what we'd want to be doing is bringing forward all sorts of amendments and everything else. Well, why bring forward an application as poor as this? Why not actually fill in the gaps that you already know? You know what planning law and legislation and everything else and what the requirements are for local authorities, etc., what they require to meet minimum standards of either dwelling distances or impacts on gaps or attenuation ponds, filtration levels for SUD schemes and all that kind of stuff. Why did you not do that before bringing it before us? It's an absolute farce. I mean, I've been on this council for a number of years now. I've seen numerous amounts of applications where there's been tweaks of this and changes to that and all that kind of thing. And I get that, I understand it. This needs a complete rewrite, in my view. even if it were then to be deemed as being acceptable at that point. The site's completely awkward and, as I say, isolated, slap bang in the middle of the countryside. It's close to some very sensitive areas, sinks, and also to the countryside and mature trees and all that kind of stuff. So the impact on the ecology, wildlife, is going to be quite significant if we were to allow this. And also, it opens up more areas of land to be developed as a result, because you will have this urbanising effect, which, as we well know, has been argued as the fact of, well, if you've got the urban edge there, you can then move the urban edge somewhere else, and we end up with coalescence right across the piece. For all the reasons, which I have to say I'm very pleased to see the report, which is very concise and very expansive with regards to the all of the reasons why we should potentially be refusing this. I absolutely agree. There are far too many to list this evening for myself. I'm sure other speakers may want to elaborate further, but you know, I have the view that we should be doing things with the environment, not to the environment, and I'm afraid we have a local plan, it has been adopted, we have got a clear housing land supply where we are delivering on sites. I absolutely get the fact that we have to build, but we have to build in the right places, and I'm afraid actually, in a way, yes, we do need to deliver those homes. We need those home builders to deliver them at a faster rate, rather than just keep basically passing planning applications on warm, green, open fields for this kind of sort of development, which clearly actually doesn't, in my view, add any value to Botley, Botley Green, Botley Park, or anywhere else for that matter, and certainly not to the borough, in my view. It's not a good application and we shouldn't be supporting it. So I'm very happy to propose that we refuse it for all the issues and reasons outlined in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Any other councillor, please, to speak? Yes, Councillor Corben.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the applicant's representative for his honesty of coming here and saying this was going to be refused, and clearly sounds as if it is. What I'm not very keen on, though, is the time, both financial that it's taken this council to get to this position of the fast tonight of whatever we're doing, and also the resources. It's taking up council committee time, and it's clearly set hairs running in the community, and this type of application is just the worst type of application, and I completely endorse everything that Councillor Kyrle has said in terms of all of the points that he made, frankly. This was an application that really we shouldn't be looking at tonight, and the fact that the applicant is specifically saying they want 12 months from now so they get a zero-fee application next time, if I'm honest, I think that's a bit of an insult, and I think that is just not fair, and I think that's playing the system, which you're perfectly entitled to do, and again, your honesty of saying that, but I won't be supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corben. Councillor Kinloch.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the thorough report. I've read it with interest. I just really want to echo everything that anybody else has already said. This site is in the countryside. It is in the plan in the countryside. It is close to the Hamble. It is close to sort of natural environments, and there is already great pressure on these areas, and we know that we're trying to protect those facilities, those amenities, and this is, I really worry about this. And also, as has already been mentioned, is the vast increase in traffic. If anybody's been down that neck of the woods recently with the closure of Winchester Road, it is a death trap, and we are only lucky that somebody hasn't had a major accident down there. And this would be the equivalent of putting those things on the roads there by putting this development in that place. It is narrow, without major works to the roads all around that area. It just wouldn't be sustainable. And we have people stuck in houses in a time of crisis where they can't have any choice but to have a car. They can't afford the car and they can't do this. And again, putting this where it is, in the place that it is, with no access to any of sort of local amenities of things, and forcing them into cars is not the right choice. And I also have to, I just flags that thing, is that thing of flooding in this patch of the world. Actually, there is pressure on further down the Hamble and the tributaries in Botley. We've seen those happen, and that does concern me. So I think for all the reasons that have already been stated, I don't think I can support this application either.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kinloch. Councillor House.
Thanks very much, Chair. So firstly, I agree with all the above, and to echo firstly Councillor Corben's comment about thanking the applicant for their transparency in terms of saying that they actually want a refusal rather than withdraw, but equally for the same reasons, somewhat askance at the reason for that, which is to get a free ride next time, despite the fact it's going to cost this council significant sums to process a new application. I think we do need to be really clear the underlying reasons for refusing this application, which is that we have an adopted local plan. That local plan allocates more than enough sites for the next decade, and it also has a 5-year land supply. So there is no reason for us to stray into the countryside for other sites speculatively. That's the reason why we refused the Maddoxford Lane application, which was half in, half out, the local plan, and it's the reason why we'll refuse this tonight, I believe, fundamentally. It is also why I can't see how the situation is going to change in a year's time if the applicant reapplies. The applicant will be more honest to go to appeal, actually, because in a year's time, we'll still have an adopted local plan, we'll still have a 5-year land supply, we still won't need to see new incursions into the countryside. Nothing is going to change. So for all those reasons, I'm perturbed at the circumstances that we're in tonight and the circumstances we're going to be in potentially in 16, 18 months' time when a new application comes in front of this committee. I think we just need to be really clear also just for a couple of points in the report, just in terms of being absolutely clear about our reasons for refusal and a couple of bits of text. There's one bit of text I think is wrong. Paragraph 63 says sensible, when I believe it should mean sensitive. It's a landscape point. We talk about density. I didn't see the argument in the report about whether the application was in conformity of the local plan in terms of density. I suspect it probably is. So we just need to be clear how we're phrasing that. The Botley Parish Neighbourhood Plan, quite take Colin Mercer's points about the progress the neighbourhood plan is working on, and all credit to Botley Parish Council for being one of the few parishes that's progressing a neighbourhood plan, but we can't really give that significant weight. There was one comment in the report that suggested, not from the council staff, but from another commentator, that we should be giving it weight. We need to be clear that we're not giving it significant weight. And for all those reasons, that holds up. I think there's another factor here which does trouble me, and it's not a reason for refusal as such, but it's a reason for scepticism about any future application. Even if we will see one in a year's time or 3 years' time, let's just imagine a situation. I know the Parish Council and Botley Council close your ears. Imagine a situation where in a few years' time the applicant comes forward through the local plan process this time, having had the next application refused here and then refused at appeal. And let's just say the council were to allocate the site eventually, or part of the site eventually, and say that it should have a proper development brief as opposed to the application that's in front of us this evening for all the points that Councillor Kyrle was making. Let's imagine that situation. This application is still an application from a land promoter. It's not an application from a developer. The way the land promotion works is the land promoter gets the planning permission and flogs the site to someone. And then they develop it, usually by putting a new application in for something quite different. And that creates a massive delay. So I'm particularly sceptical, if I'm honest, and we should think about these issues, because deliverability would matter at some point in the future, that this applicant has got a bad track record in terms of bringing sites forward they got planning permission for. There's a site in Netley that Stratland promoted very heavily, Grange Road, for development. Put a planning application in 2016. It was approved in January 2018. Not one start on site on a home has been made yet, nearly 5 years later, because the land promotion system doesn't deliver homes. It delivers profits to land promoters. And eventually to developers, but only eventually to developers. So I'm sceptical for all those reasons, even though the reasons are absolutely clear-cut. We should be refusing this application for all the reasons that are set out in the report, with a couple of amendments that have been made this evening in terms of debate for the reasons stated. So very happy to support the refusal, despite the fact the applicant's been upfront about what they're trying to achieve here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Any other councillor wish to speak on this application? Okay. Well, it's very interesting comments from you, Councillor House, and a lot of food for thought, really. As you've mentioned regarding the local plan is adopted, the officers worked really hard on that, and I think there are still quite a few councils that are still working on theirs. But we've moved forward, and ours is now adopted. And with that local plan, I don't think it will make any difference if the applicant, as you said, came back in 12 months' time or whatever, because that local area plan carries a lot of weight. Also reading through the report, there are lots of objections from various councils and organisations. I believe there's even an objection from the Environment Agency on this one. So I think that carries quite a lot of weight. So we have a proposer from Councillor Kyrle to refuse this application, which is the recommendation that we have here and the reasons given on the agenda. So could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Kinloch, thank you. So all those in favour for the recommendation to refuse this application as per the agenda, please show. Thank you. Right. I think that's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Okay, right. We're now going to move on to item 9, which is land northwest of Winchester Road, Botley Green. And I'd like to ask Liz Harrison to present the report, please. Liz, thank you. And I should mention that any pictures will come up here, or diagrams will come up here on the screen for members of the public to see that. Thank you.
So this is the application to amend the existing Section 106 legal agreement for the Botley Gardens development in Botley Green. There are a number of proposed amendments related to triggers for the completion of certain highway works and also for in relation to provision of pedestrian and cycle routes and a bus pedestrian and cycle route. So just to give you some context, so is outlined in red, and you've got Winchester Road running to the east, and you can see the Botley Park development is up there to the northeast. Hedge End is the other side of the railway to the southwest, and then there's a very small area location to the west where the site adjoins Shamblehurst Lane North. Just in case it helps a little bit more, there's the same annotations but with the aerial photograph. So you can see the railway line a bit more clearly and the existing development of Botley Green down here to the southeast. So you'll see from the report that one of the first changes that they're looking to make is the trigger for when the highway works for Shamblehurst Lane North would be brought forward. Now, this is an indicative plan that was included in the Section 106, but I've just tried to give an indication as to the main features that this work would bring forward. So it relates firstly to the new access into the site. Sorry, just see if I can pointer. So the new access in would be here, and that would serve the proposed station user car park, and it would also provide bus access through into the rest of the development site, but it would not be a through link for other vehicles. They could only access the station user car park. As you can see here, this is the existing access to the north side of the platform, and that would remain, and also the existing public footpath 1 access out onto Shamblehurst Lane North. There would be an additional stepped access up to the bridge, over which there would be traffic light controls just here, and the roads leading up to it would be widened to approximately 6 metres, but the bridge itself would be narrowed to a single lane, and that would be controlled through signals. And then the introduction of a footway to the western side, increasing in width to 2 metres the further west you go. So those are the works that we're referring to when we're talking about the Shamblehurst Lane North works. The other works that are mentioned are the bus access restrictor. Now this is an extract from the approved layout for the phase 1 of Botley Gardens, and the bus access restrictor would be in this location here. You can see the space has been designed for it, and it's something that the County Council would agree the final details, but it is considered that they can be achieved through design, but with the potential for adding automatic number plate recognition if required to prevent it being used by through traffic and only being used to allow it to be only used for bus the through route connecting the Winchester Road with Shamblehurst Lane North. And the station user car parks that I was referring to, one is accessed via Shamblehurst Lane North, and the other one would be accessed from within the development site, but there would be no through link. It is that those works here, the station user car park, they're not proposed to be changed as part of the deed of variation, but they are the ones that have the trigger of 350 occupations that the developer is seeking to be consistent with for all of these works, so that the Shamblehurst Lane North works we were just talking about and the bus access restrictor would be provided by the 350th occupation together with the station user car parks. So you'll have seen in the report that mention was made about the phasing and where development has actually started. When the development was granted permission on appeal, it was thought that development would start in the northern part of the site, and this was phase 1. And the triggers have obviously been set up accordingly. Now, development has actually commenced in the centre of the site, close to the access with Winchester Road, which would be anticipated, but instead of heading north, and this is the route of the road that would connect through, they're actually starting here and then heading south due to land ownership issues. So as a result, these two areas circled would bring about a total of approximately 170 units, which would mean that the trigger for the bus access restrictor and the Shamblehurst Lane North works by 150 occupations would need to be, as currently worded, provided prior to any development really reaching into the first phase of the development and being accessed along this access road. So it's for those reasons that the looking at the phasing and where development has started and where it's going to continue before it moves into phase 1 in the north, being called phase 1 because that's how it's been named, but actually obviously it's not coming forward in numerical order. So it's because of the where development is occurring and where it's going to be built out next that officers have felt that the changes could be accepted in this instance. Just one update to the report. In paragraph 43, it mentioned that first occupations are anticipated in October this year. The applicant has recently said it's now more likely to be November. So just some key points to stress. The application does not seek to remove any of the obligations in the existing 106. It just seeks to amend the triggers by which some of the elements need to be provided. As I've explained, the main changes are to provide the Shamblehurst Lane North works and the bus access restrictor works by the 350th occupation rather than the 150th occupation. And looking at the Council's recent housing land supply document, that would be approximately a 2-year delay, which would bring you to March 2026, just for information, with the 150 years being 2 years prior to that, so March 2024. In addition, to reflect the fact that those changes would have a knock-on impact on pedestrian and cycle access, which would be ultimately be provided alongside the main spine road that winds its way through phase 1 and connects to Shamblehurst Lane North. There is an additional obligations have been negotiated with the applicant to include a pedestrian and cycle route through the site by the 200th occupation. Now that might be in a temporary location, so the exact detail of that would need to be agreed as part of the legal agreement, but also there is currently no requirement for the bus route to be open and usable by a particular date within the legal agreement, so that is an additional obligation that's been negotiated which provides certainty that the bus route would be permanently available as with the pedestrian cycle route either side by the 350th occupation. As I've indicated, the developments commenced in the centre of the site, and the first 4 phases to be built out are likely to provide approximately 175 dwellings before the development reaches into the phase 1 in the northern part of the site, along which the spine road will run. So the triggers to provide the Shamblehurst Lane North and the bus access restrictor in that northern part of the site prior to the 150th occupation are not now in line with the anticipated build-out. And as I've just indicated, there are additional obligations have been negotiated to provide earlier provision of pedestrian and cycle routes through the site. So as I've indicated, ordinarily we would not be looking to push back triggers, but given the phasing and the build-out sequence for this site, on this occasion it is felt by officers that the proposed amendments would not have a significant detrimental impact on the building out of the development, the provision of the associated infrastructure, or the impact on the surrounding area, together with sustainable travel or the local highway network. And you will have seen from the report that the County Council have not raised any objection, and they are they find the proposed amendments acceptable and would be a signatory to the deed of variation. So it's therefore recommended for those reasons that the proposed deed of variation is agreed and set out in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. And again, we have some speakers on this application. We have Dr. Colin Mercer, again, who wishes to speak. Now, I was slightly confused, Dr. Mercer, whether you were speaking supporting the recommendations or you were objecting to them.
Objecting to them.
Okay, thank you.
Or objecting to a couple of specific ones. I have asked to be circulated a little drawing here, which is being handed out at the moment. It concerns the footpath that ultimately leads to the station as such. This was promised with Botley Park. How long ago was that promise? And now we're seeking to delay it. There are 1,700 houses or so in Botley Park. That's a lot of people. A lot of people who have an inadequate bus service and may require to use the train. And now we want to put it back. Now, I can see and understand the developer wanting to jiggle things about, and many of the things that Liz has explained are probably common sense to do. But this is work that could go on regardless of any development whatsoever being done elsewhere. The work on the road can be done, and the work on the footpath can be done. And it's not going to interfere with anything else that goes on. All it will do is put in place something that should have been done years ago. And the parish council has a general overall objection towards delaying some of the triggers as such. Part of that, I'm sorry to say, the messages coming out about these triggers was very confused and unclear, because they come out in, we didn't know which order things were doing, so we would perhaps not have complained quite so much if we'd had the whole story. And I understand the pressure that the planning people are under, and they are suffering from a lack of information to give a coherent view here. But nevertheless, whatever it is, that footpath is really, really, really important. It will not interfere with anything. So why can't it go ahead? Well, if the developers are short of money, that's their problem, not the population's problem. So I'll leave it at that point. It's that one which we really, really want to push you to say, well, you can accept the others, and we might moan a bit about some of them. But this one, we will make very serious complaints about because of its long, long history. So thank you, gentlemen and ladies. And Madam Chairman, I've finished.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mercer. We now have Rob Collett from Miller Homes, obviously speaking in support of the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members, for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Rob Collett. I'm Planning Director at Miller Homes. As members will be aware, and as Ms Harrison's gone through, the site's got development for the erection of 680 new homes that are well underway, with the first homes due to be occupied in November 2022. The Section 106 legal agreement has secured a package of highway measures that Ms Harrison has gone through in terms of Shamblehurst Lane North and also at the Winchester Road Bob Lane roundabout. The Section 106 agreement included triggers for the delivery of the works, but there's disparity between the triggers, and it's requested that alternative triggers are agreed to enable the works to be brought forward as a comprehensive package. But it's important to note that we're not seeking to amend the details that were approved in any way. We're only seeking to amend triggers for their delivery. It's important to also note, picking up on Dr. Mercer's point, just that we're not seeking to close the existing public right-of-way through the site, and there are obligations within the current Section 106 agreement to permit cycle usage prior to the first occupation, and we're not seeking to amend those obligations. The requests that we're making this evening seek to vary entering into the highways agreement at the 50th occupation. The discussions are well advanced with Hampshire County Council to agree the highway works agreements. Inevitably, though, these sorts of works take a long time to agree, although by entering into the highways agreement at the 50th occupation still provides sufficient time to enable the works to be completed by the 350th occupation. The proposed works to vary the trigger of the delivery of the Shamblehurst Lane North works and the bus restrictor access to prior to the 350th occupation will bring it in line with the provision of the station user car park. And we've undertaken discussions with Hampshire County Council and understand that no bus operator has been identified for this site as yet. As such, there's no need for the delivery of the Shamblehurst Lane North link at the 150th occupation, and the revised trigger would allow additional time for the County Council to negotiate with bus operators to deliver a bus route through the site at the relevant point. We've spoken with Hampshire County Council's highway officers who've confirmed that the changes are acceptable and there won't be any significant or unacceptable impacts on the highway network. We're also happy to have worked with your officers at Eastleigh Borough Council and also highways officers at Hampshire County Council to agree additional obligations into the Section 106 agreement, as Ms Harrison has already talked about, to provide a bus, pedestrian and cycle route through the site prior to 350 occupations and for a pedestrian and cycle route prior to 200 occupations. These additional obligations will provide additional community benefit by securing sustainable travel methods for the wider community as well as residents of Botley Gardens through the site towards Hedge Station, and provide obligations where there is currently no obligations for their provision. I therefore ask you to endorse your officer's recommendation this evening and agree to the requested changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collett. Was something to come up on this? Thank you.
So yes, I just wanted to come back quickly with regard to the existing public right-of-way, just to clarify the history there. So the Botley Park development had an obligation in it that the works would either be done to improve the public footpath link through to Hedge train station or to pay a contribution of money. When it came to them looking to do the works, the Japanese knotweed was found on the footpath, and the Botley Park developers weren't in control of that land, so they couldn't clear the Japanese knotweed. Obviously, that is the landowner's responsibility, and that is the ways forward to do that have been agreed, and it's currently underway. But it meant that the developers therefore asked the County Council if they could pay the contribution instead, rather than hold up their development for reasons that were outside of their control. So the County Council agreed to that, and the contribution has been paid. I've checked the records. The County Council do have the money from Botley Park. So the Botley Park development will be paying for an improvement to the surface of the Botley footpath number 1 that runs from Winchester Road through to Hedge train station, Shamblehurst Lane North. Apologies, I say that wrong every time. And then the Botley Gardens development has an obligation for that Botley footpath number 1 to be, they have to make the necessary actions to enable that to be used by cyclists prior to first occupation. So, as they've indicated, first occupation is anticipated to be next month. So from next month, the applicant has indicated to me that they intended to meet that obligation by giving permissive rights for cyclists. So the footpath is already there and is not affected by these changes. That is an existing footpath. It is there. There might, I know there's been a temporary closure, but it's a route. It's staying there. It's part of the development, and it's not being diverted. From prior to first occupation, which is anticipated to be next month, so in a very short term, it will then be permissive rights for that to be used by cyclists. So that is separate from any of the changes we're discussing tonight. So the additional obligation that we were talking about with regard to the pedestrian and cycle route by a 200th obligation was in regard to a better, because the public footpath will still remain as a leisure route. So we're obviously looking at an accessible, smooth surfaced route for pedestrians and cyclists through the development, and that's the additional obligation at 200. But prior to that, pedestrians and cyclists will be able to use Botley footpath number 1. And in time, unfortunately we can't control that, Hampshire County Council have the money to spend to improve the surface. So that was just to clarify, they are two separate matters, and what we're discussing tonight doesn't change what's happening to Botley footpath number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I just asked for a bit of clarification on that because there was quite a bit in there. So the Botley footpath number 1, which already exists and runs through the Botley Gardens development, is available for cyclists and pedestrians to use at the moment.
So it's already available to use by pedestrians because obviously it's a public right of way, and then the Botley Gardens Section 106 obligation, legal agreement as currently written, and which is not being proposed to be changed, requires the applicant, the developers, to put in place measures so that that footpath can also legally be used by cyclists. So they're intending to do that through giving permissive rights over that footpath. And that has to be done prior to the first occupation, which hasn't happened yet, but is anticipated to be next month. So before that, they will have to enable the use of that footpath by cyclists, which would then give pedestrians and cyclists a route along the footpath from Winchester Road to Shabwell-Hurst Lane.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, Councillor Kinloch.
Sorry, so permissive rights is nothing to the footpath itself. It is literally just allowing cyclists to use it. Is that right?
Sorry, what was the first part of your...
So the permissive rights bit is just a legal bit of paper that says they can use bikes down it. It doesn't do anything to the surface of that footpath.
No, there is no obligation for Botley Gardens to do anything to the surface of the footpath, because that has been achieved through the Botley Park development. Now, Botley Park development have met their obligation by giving the money to the County Council. It is the County Council who haven't yet spent it on improving the surface. But they do have, the money has been paid. So the surfacing is covered by Botley Park development, and then the use of the route by cyclists is covered by Botley Gardens. So we can't ask Botley Gardens to do something because it's already covered by Botley Park.
Councillor Corben.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to have to come back to this. Ignoring Botley Park, we've got a footpath that will be used and that will be allowed for cyclists to use that from the first occupation. I think I've understood that. In terms of what we're looking at tonight for the Section 106 amendment, what is the requirement for this development in terms of a footpath and a cycleway? What are they committed to doing that we're being asked to change specifically, please?
So the legal agreement as currently worded doesn't actually require them to provide a pedestrian and cycle link through the site by a certain time. There is no obligation, but the approved plans for phase 1 show that either side of the main road there will be a pedestrian cycle route off-road. So effectively adjacent to the road, cyclists can cycle, they don't have to cycle on the road, it's a shared footpath cycleway. So that is shown on the approved plans. So when as and when phase 1 comes forward, that is what we'll be expecting to be built. You'll have the road going through, and either side you'll have the pedestrian and cycleway. But the legal agreement does not provide any trigger in terms of number of occupations as to when that needs to be done. You could potentially link it through to, well, the only possible link, it doesn't mention it specifically, but obviously the bus access restrictor has a trigger in there, and that the plans for where that is located, you would anticipate that if they're putting that in, the pedestrian and cycle route either side of it would also be put in, but it doesn't automatically mean that it would be connected to anything, because there is no obligation in there that there needed to be a pedestrian cycle route through by a particular point in time.
Oh, sorry. So this would be an additional obligation, the 200th occupation that is suggested, irrespective of the footpath issue we've just been talking about, which is from day 1, and then the 200th occupation, they would have to have a tarmac surfaced head cycle read the site.
Right, so that is dependent, that happening, bringing it forward to the 200th occupation, which at the moment there isn't a timescale. Making it 200 is dependent on us agreeing the whole of this amendment to delay the infrastructure elsewhere.
It is part of the package. Members could technically take each item in the table and have a yes or no to each item. The package before you includes it, but ultimately, when you amend a deed, when you produce a deed of variation, you can change whichever bit, subject to agreement from all parties. You can change whichever bit. So it's not that is the package in front of you. But if members have differing views on different elements, then that's obviously something members would have to consider and whether they want to continue negotiations.
Thank you very much. One final question from me. Have we talked to, just taking that theme, have we talked to the developer about delivery of any individual bits of the infrastructure? We have a railway car park that I don't know who's going to park in. Not too bothered about that, if I'm absolutely honest. We've got bus stops that we haven't got a bus that's going to stop there. But we do have one of the positives of this, the only positive that I could think of, are improvements to Shamblehurst Lane North, particularly over the railway bridge. And those of us that drive that route regularly, that coming forward actually was really positive. So I just wondered if there had been any discussions about, we talk about looking at the individual bits of the package, whether that has been discussed and whether that is viable, that they could bring that forward on its own.
It hasn't been discussed because they're just not a different trigger for that particular element, because the reasoning behind the application was, from the developer's point of view, was to get one time frame for all of those elements. But if members wished, then that is obviously something that we could delegate back for negotiation. But I haven't had those discussions to date.
Any other councillor wishes to make any comment or question regarding these changes to the triggers? Oh yes, sorry, Councillor Kyrle.
We're going into debate on this? Yeah?
We are discussing, yes.
Oh, we're in debate now?
Yes, we are, as per what Councillor House said previously.
Oh, I do apologise. Sorry, I thought we were just questions only at this point. Sorry, do apologise. Shall I carry on then?
Yeah, carry on.
Right, carry on then. Okay, fine. Thank you. I'm probably going to be accused of being Mr. Grumpy tonight. You're grumpy. But thank you. I'm quite angry about this, to be perfectly honest with you, because this site was a site which was not being promoted by the Borough Council in its development plan because it was in the local gap. We would have seen coalition. God, yeah, perhaps I'm thinking about something else. Coalescence of maybe that's a bit too early, but I don't know. Coalescence in effect of Botley, Botley Green, Botley Park, and Hedge End in effect being coalesced by development in the local gap. I actually spoke at the appeal, and I'm not sure how many others did, but I spoke at the appeal, and we were told by the promoter that everyone was going to use the train, that there didn't need to be any roads. That was the justification. That's why it's a super sustainable site. It was because everyone's going to use the train. We all knew that isn't going to be the case. Wasn't going to be the case. And now we find ourselves, because somebody else, the developer wants to build a certain element of it at a different pace to somewhere else in a different part of the site, that they now want to change all the triggers for the delivery of the infrastructure. We've seen this on other sites before. It really is not very helpful whatsoever. It's not sustainable. The problem is with it, and whether the county agree with it or not, clearly they're looking at it from what impacts will be on their already adopted highway. Well, clearly, obviously, they've looked at entrances, exits, all that kind of stuff, and traffic numbers and all that kind of thing. So clearly, any changes to triggers internally within the site actually probably won't have an impact on the existing adopted highway network, because obviously those cars are going to come in and go out or whatever, and everyone's going to use the train or whatever they're going to do. So I can understand why the county wouldn't be particularly bothered, because it's not actually anything to do with them at the moment, because they haven't adopted it because it hasn't been built. whether a bus company wants to come along and actually use a road that clearly isn't in existence at the moment, clearly I would suggest that a bus company probably wouldn't be interested in a road that doesn't exist. So therefore, I think that's a bit of a moot point, really. The whole point of delivering infrastructure first is that you actually you forward or front load the sustainability within the site. So you make it far more attractive for not only people wanting to buy homes, but also for people wanting to use more sustainable modes of transport, whether that be walking, cycling, or whatever. And that is exactly what we should be about with this sort of stuff. Yes, it's delivering quality homes, although albeit on this site that we didn't want to see developed, but quality homes in a community attached to, with permeability, with sustainability of the wider network, shall we say, within whether that's Hedge End, Botley Park, or Botley itself. And to change all this quite significantly, in my view, because actually the deliverability of some of these homes would mean that actually we'd be looking at quite a number of years before some of this stuff is actually delivered. And some of it, say the improvements to the roundabout, if you like, might actually be of a benefit to other road users and other developments potentially in the area. So it's actually a connectivity issue there as well. So to change that trigger, I think, would be unfortunate. Plus also the murky and dark past when we start looking at this permissive route and the pedestrian access through the site and everything else. I remember having discussions about this improvement to the public right-of-way that then delivered a walking, cycling route between Winchester Road, if you like, and the Hedge End railway station, talking about this quite a number of years ago, because it was part of the Botley Park development application. And now to find out that the County Council have now been given a chunk of money basically to treat some Japanese knotweed, not guarantee that they're going to upgrade the surface, fills me with absolute horror, frankly, to be honest with you, because that public right-of-way was supposedly the arguable sustainable link between the railway station and Botley Park, with all those hundreds of homes up there and residents wanting to be able to cycle to Hedge End and walk to Hedge End and everything else. Now we're being told we have absolutely no idea when that's going to be put forward. And also we want to extend the trigger to be able to have the pavement pathway, etc., through the site being delivered. It's a shocker. We are delivering developments which are isolated by definition of not having connectivity through the planning system. And I'm quite angry about this. I don't agree that we should be changing the triggers. We should be bringing forward these elements, actually, not delaying the elements, because it's not good planning in my view. Because we are, as I say, we're literally proposing that we are going to make things isolated and residents not being able to connect with their wider community. I don't actually also, I mean, this is probably part of the planning application probably, which was lost at appeal, obviously. I'm not sure about these bus restrictor things either. I don't think they work. I mean, there was a bus restrictor one outside our borough, which was opened on a very, I think it was opened on a trial basis and then just remained open. As we knew it would be, because suddenly as soon as traffic is allowed to use it, they suddenly go, oh, that means it's alleviated the problem on that roundabout, or that junction. So I think it was Yew Tree Lane or something. I think it was open for a short period of time, and then it's remained open ever since. And there are issues around bus restrictors as well, and perhaps the technology's moved on, where there are issues of emergency access vehicles and all that kind of stuff, etc., wanting to be able to get to properties when they're directed down a road and then find they can't get through because the bus restrictor's in place. So I don't know about that, but I am very concerned about this. I don't think this is the right way to go forward. I'm very concerned about this public right-of-way because it's unpassable for 6 months of the year because it's so wet and muddy and everything else, and both Dave and myself and officers actually met on site, didn't we, and had to wear our, well, I wasn't wearing Wellington boots to my to my regret, because it is absolutely horrific. So if we're proposing that people are going to start using that as a means of up to the 250th home getting to the train station without having to wear galoshes or wearing waders, I think that's just absolutely plain ridiculous, frankly, to be honest. So I'm afraid, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be supporting this for all the reasons I've just outlined. Sorry to have bored you all, and sorry if you think I'm being grumpy, but there you go.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Councillor House.
Well, I'm going to agree with the never grumpy Councillor Kyrle, but I'm a bit depressed rather than grumpy, actually. I'm going to wend people's minds back to May 2016, because that was the date when the planning application appeal was heard, after this area committee had refused this planning application because it was in the countryside in the gap between Hedge and Botley Green. And the planning appeal was heard, and there were 5 people in this room who spoke at that hearing. Councillor Kyrle was one, Councillor Tennent was another, Councillor Colin Mercer was another, I was another, and an ever so young planner by the name of Kitty Budden, I don't know what happened to her, was the council's planning witness. And we all argued what we thought was a good case. The planning inspector came to a conclusion in August 2016. It was called in by the Secretary of State, and the name we haven't heard, the elephant in the room, is Sajid Javid, because it was Sajid Javid who permitted this development in November 2016 against this council's wishes, and against Botley Parish Council's wishes too. And I think we need to understand, therefore, that what was in front of the planning inspector was the deal the planning inspector had made with the developer at that point, which the Borough Council had little choice but to acquiesce to at that point, because that's what happens with planning conditions and planning appeals. And so that's the package that's in front of us today. And it's what the developer was prepared to make a commitment to the planning inspector and the Right Honourable Sajid Javid in terms of what the developer would do. And the principal reason the appeal was allowed was because, unlike the previous application that we dealt with this evening, the council didn't have an adopted local plan, and the council couldn't prove to the inspector's satisfaction that it had a 5-year land supply. So what the planning inspector does in that situation is says, dear developer, I think, on the basis of what you're saying, you can help plug that 5-year land supply gap and build lots of nice, shiny new houses within 5 years to meet the needs of the residents of Eastleigh Borough. Now, the planning decision from the Right Honourable Sajid Javid was November 2016. Now, it doesn't take the greatest mathematician in the world to recognise the developer is now saying the first completion will be in November 2022. Exactly 6 years after the planning approval was given, and not making one jot of contribution to the borough's 5-year land supply as established in November 2016. So what this is really about is about the developers' cash flow. And we should understand that and be totally clear and honest about that. And we work quite well with the applicant. Say that to Rob while he's here this evening. We've worked well with Miller Homes over the last few years with various amendments to the scheme which try to improve on the application that originally went to the inspector by creating a bit of a gap near the railway bridge at Botley Green, between Botley Green and Hedge End, and thinking about how the school works and all the rest of it. And there's probably some more work to be done on all of that, which I'm sure we'll continue to do collaboratively because it's in everyone's interest that we try and get the best of this, even though it wasn't something we wanted. But that's not what this is. What this is about the developer saying, our cash flow is a bit tricky. Please, council, we really don't want to stick with the commitments we gave to the Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Sajid Javid, in November 2016. And I don't think that's reasonable, for the reasons Rupert said. We have a commitment to infrastructure first. It is not our residents' problem. The developer's got a short-term cash flow problem. Miller Homes is a big builder. Big builders have deep pockets, even in the financial chaos that's been created by quasi-quatang. They still have those deep pockets, able to do things and move things in a way that most local authorities can't. Even Eastleigh, even Councillor Eastleigh, can't do all these things. So there are some things here which are perfectly reasonable, given what's moved on. It makes perfect sense to make the changes around Snakemore. It makes sense to change the trigger from to the first occupation on some of the works that are here. I don't believe it makes sense to make the changes from the 150th to the 350th dwelling, because even on the developer's timetable, and you can never believe what developers say, they're lovely people really, but they have unrealistic expectations of how they're going to deliver. They're saying that the 350th occupation will be in March 2026. Well, when this report was saying, they were saying the first occupation would be in October 22. Between the time this report was written and now, they're saying November 22. We're going to have a recession, aren't we, folks? We know it. We're going to have a housing crash. We know it. We've been here before. What happens when the housing crash? Developers stop building. We are saying 350th dwelling, that could be years and years away. And all that time, these residents don't get the benefit of infrastructure. Yet the developer made a binding commitment, signed on the dotted line, not quite in the developer's blood, but made a binding commitment to deliver this stuff by the 150th occupation. So I don't think we should be making those changes. So what I'm going to move, Chair, is that we don't accept the changes from the 150th to 350th, but we accept all the rest. If the developer wants to go away from that, I would welcome sitting in front of the planning inspector talking about why Miller Homes didn't meet their obligations to deliver homes in 5 years in 2016. Because that's the root of the issue here. If they built those homes, they'd put the infrastructure in by now. But they didn't, so they haven't. That shouldn't be our community's problem. So that's all I'll move, Chair, and we'll see where that gets to in debate.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Councillor Kinloch?
Yeah, I'm not going to say too much, hopefully, but mainly just echo what both Councillor Kyrle and Councillor House have already said. It is... You've got to see this in a bigger, wider context of where it is. It's in Botley Green. Botley Green and the development of Botley Park has added a massive amount of people to that area. Botley Gardens is only going to add to that. If you add 350 homes, you're adding 700 cars onto the road, on the average of 2 per house, is what's sort of said. And it doesn't have the facilities. Hampshire County Council, I worry that their comments that they're happy with these things. They were happy to remove the bus or take back the bus subsidy from Botley Park that was agreed for 15 years. And they've not delivered anything in terms of improvements on anything between now and then. And it does worry me that this is going to be pushed back. There are people that are isolated now. We're going to go through a recession. There are going to be people isolated more. And a developer, in fairness, is probably the best route to create a safe route across that patch of land, partly because of Hampshire's failures. And I would support Keith's move to sort of say that the sort of essentially agree the rest, but keeping that 150 rather than the 350. And the road, as I say, anybody that's ever gone along Shamblehurst Lane North to cross that road bridge, it is lethal. I was running down there at 3 o'clock the other afternoon, and I had to jump onto the road. I'll jump onto the bridge going over the top of that because somebody was going over those things. It is dangerous now. You add all those extra homes, all those extra people who will be driving through that little lane will make it even worse. So absolutely, it needs to be put in as soon as possible. And I think examples of Eastleigh putting in the roads in and around One Horton Heath, I think is a great example of delivering infrastructure. There's not even a house built. Yet those roads are there, and that's what we should be encouraging our developers to do, because as it's been said, it's our residents' faults that things are there, and actually we need to make sure that we've got good access, that people can walk, that people can cycle, because that's the way that we need to kind of be encouraging people to do, and anything else is not doing them a service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kinloch. I absolutely agree. I think infrastructure first, most definitely. Our priority is with our residents and the people that are moving into that estate to have good access, and also transport facilities, because not everyone has a car. And as you mentioned previously, Councillor Kinloch, about the crisis with people at the moment who sometimes can't afford to have a car anymore. So good access, and especially for those residents, existing residents also of Botley Park, who are expecting this to happen, and they'll have good access to get to the railway station. At the moment, the route they have to take to walk, as you say, is particularly dangerous. And I agree with everything that everyone said this evening. Thank you. Liz, did you want to come back on something?
Just a couple of points just for clarification, in case, because one of the points I didn't mention, but there was reference made to the roundabout at Winchester Road, Bob Lane, Snake Moor Road, and Botley Road. The changes there only relate to the trigger for entering into the Section 278 Highways Agreement, not for the completion of the works. That remains, I believe, at 300 units, and that's not proposed to be changed. It's just the trigger by when the 278 agreement has to be entered into with the County Council. So I just wanted to confirm that, because I hadn't actually mentioned that in speaking. With regard to the treating of the Japanese knotweed, that's not actually the county council who's been doing that. That is the responsibility of the landowner. And through the Botley Gardens development, we have agreed through discharge of conditions the manner in which that would be done. So that's being done by the landowner and not the county council. I just wanted to clarify that. And with regard to the bus restrictor, it's an emergency vehicles. It is not the, I think, learning from previous experience of problems with others where they have a physical restraint. That is not what the county council currently envisage in relation to bus access restrictors. It's to do with the design to discourage people, but then also they have the ability to have to put in place automatic number plate recognition, which would be monitored by the county council, and then if vehicles other than a bus go through, that it's captured and they can take the necessary means by that way through with the number plate details. So they're not looking at physical restraints anymore. I know it used to be sort of bollards and gates and closing and things getting stuck, but that's because of those problems. I think the county have moved away from those design elements. And then, with regard to Shamblehurst Lane North, just to confirm, that access wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to get from the Botley Gardens development out onto Shamblehurst Lane North. You would have to go out by Winchester Road and up and along to get onto that road. That access, in terms of two-way traffic, would only be from buses, and then anyone who has come in off that road to park in the station, use the car park, and then obviously walked across to the train station. That would be the only level of traffic, vehicular, non-bus traffic using that access. And then the other point was just with regard to housing land supply figures. Those were the figures taken from our latest housing land supply document. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that wasn't information I put in the report, but it was verbal information. So I think that covered all those points. I just wanted to clarify a few things.
Thank you very much, Liz. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Councillor Kyrle.
Sorry, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to come back, but obviously I appreciate that Council House has made a proposal. I just wanted to just tease that a little bit further if I can, just to make sure that I'm okay with it in my own mind, is I am concerned about the pedestrian cycle route access between, shall we say, one side of the site, if you like, and the Hedge End railway side. Now, whether that's the permissive route or whether this is a infrastructure route through the site, I'm, don't really care which it is, but I'm concerned about having to wait for 200 occupations before. I know it says current trigger, there isn't one, but we're then proposing a 200 home occupancy. But I am concerned about the fact that there was a obligation, promise, whatever you like to call it, that there would be a all-weather, in my view, or certainly a better surfaced access to the railway station, whether that goes through this site or whether it goes through the permissive route. And I understand what you're saying about the county got a chunk of money. Okay, but we could be talking quite a period of time before we have permeability, sustainable permeability through the site to be able to get people to that railway station or to Hedge End and beyond, etc. We know how bad that bridge is. Anything that can make that bridge safer for pedestrians and cyclists, potentially. I probably would never cycle over there, probably, I don't think, to be honest. But anyway, anything that can make those safer for people, whether it's not car-borne, but, pedestrians or cyclists, has got to be of a benefit. And we should be encouraging as much of that as absolutely possible, given obviously the issues that Dave has raised and others. But 200 worries me that we're pushing this far too far down the road. It should be a priority to certainly be able to have a pedestrian cycle route, whether it's got a road attached to it or not. I just would like some clarification, because otherwise I'm not sure I can support it, because I genuinely feel that we have let the people of Botley Park down on our commitments to making sure that there is an all-weather route to the railway station.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Thank you very much. Right, we do have a proposed amendment then to what's being recommended here in front of us. This is the recommendation is to agree to all the proposed amendments, but I think there are some of those, if you look at them in... Sorry.
Oh, that's not what I've moved. So
oh, sorry, I thought that's what you wanted to...
No, the recommendation is we accept all of them except the changes from 150 to 350 as triggers. That's what I've moved. It's not what's on the paper. That's not what's on paper. That's not what's on the agenda. I've moved something different from that which is on the officer recommendation. So I've moved that we accept all these changes with the exception of the changes of trigger from 150 to 350 occupations. That's, if Rupert wants to move an amendment in terms of the 200th, that's clearly up to him. What I would urge caution on, and try and hopefully be helpful to this at this point, rather than unhelpful as maybe being seen in the round, is that what's on the table at the moment, before this evening, is no trigger at all in terms of access from the southern part of the development to the railway station. So this 200 trigger, even though it's lousy, is still an enhancement on what's currently legally the commitment from the developer to the community. Now, you could probably argue that any developer in their right mind is going to provide access from the southern half of the development to the railway station as a pedestrian route a lot quicker than 200 units, because it might prove hard for them to sell the houses. But that's not something we've got control over here. Now, clearly, we could send the whole thing back and say to Liz and the team, negotiate 50 or 100 or whatever. And we could do that. And if that's Rupert's amendment, then we can debate that. But at the moment, I've simply put on the table the package that's been recommended by our planners, with the exception of the triggers from 150 to 350, because those are the ones that I think are unreasonable to our community. We could have a mini debate on amendment from Rupert or from anyone else about whether we should change or try to change the trigger on the pedestrian access, but that's a separate mini debate if Rupert moves that.
Councillor Kyrle.
Thank you for that, Keith. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'd be happy to move an amendment then to that, that we do go into a debate potentially about that trigger. I appreciate that there's nothing on the table and that 200 has been put as a proposed trigger, but all for the reasons I outlined earlier, I think that that's far too far into the future. We need to guarantee a all-weather route between both sides, if you like, linking all of that with a sustainable route prior to 200. So I would certainly be looking at 50 as a minimum, because I think that's realistic, because you're looking at connectivity throughout the entire for that area. I know we're looking at this particular site, but everything does connect, and it should connect. And we in my view, we had a commitment that we were going to deliver something, and we haven't. That hasn't happened. Now that may not necessarily be in Miller Holmes's gift, if you like, in that respect, but clearly it is still part of the planning process, and in my view we should be pushing for that at an earlier delivery date rather than, and even 50 potentially, even though we were talking about 50 probably could get delivered within a reasonably short period of time, but given the issues we've already sort of explored, I think just 200 is just a bit too far away for me to be able to support if it were all in a package, as Councillor House has. I agree with what Elsie said, don't get me wrong, totally, absolutely, but this makes me feel very uneasy, so I would be proposing that the trigger would be 50.
So as you're proposing an amendment, Councillor Kyrle, I need a seconder, please. Councillor Kinloch. Thank you very much. Right, now if you just bear me with just 1 second to sort this out, thank you. Just going to confirm, thank you. Right, so the amendment that Councillor Kyrle has put forward to 50 occupations, is that right in saying that rather than 200? Right, we have a proposer and a seconder. Can I ask for a show of hands, all those in favour, please?
Debate, Chair.
Sorry?
There might be debate on that, I don't know.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Is there any debate? Yes, let's go.
A question, I suppose, more than debate. How does that work? If that hasn't already been negotiated, what are we actually saying? Is that go away and come back? Does it amount to a deferral or what?
I think there are two options. You could delegate it back to officers to negotiate those elements. If we achieve that with the revised triggers that members want to do, if we achieve that subject to consultation with the chair and vice chair, it wouldn't need to come back to committee. If we don't achieve it, it would have to come back anyway because we wouldn't have a recommendation. If you defer it, it would have to come back whether we've reached agreement or not, which potentially means bringing it back when we might not need to. So if members, obviously it's up to members. If members are happy to delegate it back, I would, if you wouldn't mind, like to make sure we've gone through each of the elements in the table to make sure I'm sure as to what we've got the right things. But then if you delegate it back to officers, we could see if we can reach agreement with the applicant on that basis. If we do permission, the deed of variation could proceed and be signed. If we don't, we'd have to come back with a new position and for members to vote on.
Okay, Councillor Kyrle, would you be happy for delegation? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right. Yes, Councillor.
So I'm debating on the amendment now. And on the basis of the discussion we've just had and Liz's response, I'm very happy to support the amendment, but I think it should be a separate vote because it is a different set of issues. And once we've had that vote, then clearly there's still a substantive vote or substantive debate and vote on the package as a whole. But I'll happily support what Rupert said.
Right, any more debate on the amendment, please? Thank you. Right, in that case, could I have a show of hands, all those in favour of the amendment proposed and seconded? Thank you. Right, I think that's unanimous then, thank you very much. Right, we now need to vote on the recommendation in front of us with the change.
Unless there's any more debate, Chair.
I'm sorry?
Unless there's any more debate.
Oh, right, okay, sorry. Unless there's any more debate. Thank you. No? Good. Right. Okay then. Let's move on then. Right. So we're now going to vote on the recommendation for the proposed amendments, but with the change that Councillor House has proposed. Yes?
Change the Councillor Kyrle proposed actually, because the motion.
Oh, sorry.
The motion was that we accept everything that's on the table from the start from the planning team.
Okay.
With the exception of the trigger movements from 150 to 350,
yep.
Rupert then successfully amended the proposal on the 200 trigger down to 50. So it's my motion, as amended by Rupert, is what we're now voting on.
Okay.
Could I just interject?
Yeah, of course.
Right, so if members have got, if members have got the report in front of them, paragraph 30 and paragraph 35 have got tables in. They are elsewhere, but that's where I've got it open. So the first one, entering into the section 278 highways agreements, that's unchanged. Yes. The next one, completing Shamblehurst Lane North Works by 350, that's not accepted. Members' view is I had to stay at 150. Submission of approval of bus access restrict. So this is just the submission of the details prior to first occupation instead of commencement. That's not changed. The last one on this table, complete the bus access restrictor works. The motion is to keep that as 150 and not to change it. And then looking at paragraph 35, the accessible pedestrian cycle route, the new obligation, proposed at 50th occupation. And then it hasn't been discussed, but the bus route and pedestrian cycle one, that can stay at 350? Or is that... Because that's the one there is nothing at the moment. So
yeah, no, these were the two bits that I was just a bit concerned about. And to be honest, as you say, this is why I wanted clarification about what Councillor House was saying, because from my perspective, it should be 150, because certain other elements I think are linked to this to a degree. So I think actually this should also be 150, even though I know there wasn't actually a requirement a current agreed trigger. But going to 350, I think this should also be 150. But again, that could be another amendment if Councillor House wasn't in favour, saying that that's
If that's moving a further amendment, I'll happily take it on board as part of the substantive, because clearly there's a negotiation now to be had between our planning team and the developer.
Yes, I would then therefore be happy to propose that as another additional amendment, that it's 150 and not 350.
Okay, so do we have a seconder for that amendment?
I've taken it on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there any debate? No? Thank you. Can I have a show of hands then, please, on that amendment? Thank you very much.
This is interesting, isn't it?
To look at the, all the other bits and pieces that Liz has mentioned in her table. Okay, so could I have a proposer, please?
It's already been proposed, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Seconder?
It's already been proposed and seconded.
Okay, right. All those in favour? Much. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Right. Okay then. Right. Members of the public, you're very welcome to stay if you wish, but if you want to leave, then that's fine as well. Thank you. And thank you for your participation this evening. It's much appreciated. Right. We're now going to move on to item 10. Thank you very much. Good night. Which is planning application for number 8, Chapel Close, West End, and as at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Gomer has declared an interest. Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Alexandra Stone to present the report, please. Alexandra, thank you. And again, it will appear on the screen up there.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Application at 8 Chapel Close, West End, is for conversion of utility and single-storey rear extension to create attached annex, new porch and raised patio to the rear. The application site is located within the urban edge at the northern end of Chapel Close. Chapel Close is made up of 2-storey semi-detached houses in cul-de-sac formation. To the northeast of the site is a terraced row of bungalows which are set back from other houses. Picture 1 shows the property, which is a 3-bedroom semi-detached house with an open gable roof. You can see the dwelling is set down slightly from the neighbouring property on the right-hand side. Picture 2 shows that there is a variation in types of porches within the close. The proposed porch is also similar in appearance to some of them. Picture 3 is of the side of the existing property and is taken from the front of the bungalows, which are set back and away from the application site. These pictures show the dwelling as existing to the rear. There is an existing side extension, which is currently the utility area. You can also see the rear lean-to conservatory. The site plan shows where the development is in red. The proposal includes a new front porch, an attached annex with a single-storey rear extension to replace the existing conservatory and to include a patio area. You can see under the red hatched area the outline of the proposed extension, with the red hatching also included the patio area. The site plan also shows the parking arrangements. A property of this size would need a minimum of 3 parking spaces as set out in the parking standard SPD, which you can see on the plan that this is achievable. The annex is for the applicant's mother, who is unable to get to the first floor due to her health. It would be accessed through the main property, through the existing kitchen area, and will share the outside space with the main dwelling, as there is no separate main access. This will allow some privacy but still integral to the house. The new front porch is similar in appearance to others in the street. The part of the rear extension that replaces the existing conservatory would be of the same size and materials. The extension for the annex would extend 4.5 metres from the existing utility room. The annex contains 1 living room / kitchen area, ensuite and bedroom. The new patio area is approximately 300 millimetres high, which is allowed by way of permitted development, therefore does not require planning permission. As you can see on the proposed front elevation plan, the proposed rear extension remains unseen from the street. You can see on the eastern elevation there is a window proposed which serves a bathroom. This is likely to be obscured. The proposed roof light is above average head height, which will prevent overlooking. As you saw on slide 3, the bungalows are set back, and so the side window would overlook the public realm, which is expected and acceptable. As the windows are to the ground level, the boundary treatment would also act as a barrier. The rear elevations show that the annex has a gable end to the extension and the replacement of the conservatory with a more in-keeping design and way of roof form and materials. You can see the steps leading to the garden from the proposed patio area, leaving ample amenity space. The proposed development complies with the relevant policies and current local plan. The design and scale of the works is appropriate for the property and will not harm the amenity or neighbouring residents. There is adequate parking on-site parking and garden area, and so the proposal was not an overdevelopment on the site. Therefore, my recommendation is permit the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and it's very good to see you here. I think it's the first time at HEWEB, isn't it? Really good to see you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, okay then. Let's open it up then to councillors. Anything? Questions? Yep. Oh, Councillor Kyrle.
Me again. When it says adequate on-site parking, I thought in the report it said that there wasn't, that they had to provide extra parking on site to meet the county's parking standard of 3 when there isn't 3 at the moment or something or other. So when it says they're adequate on-site parking, I thought that it would be provisional to the fact that there was.
With the amendment on the planning application, the drawings, they've drawn 3 parking spaces, but I did put a condition into there to say that the requirement is 3 parking spaces to be put in before the development.
They have demonstrated that they can get 3 on it, okay, which was the requirement.
Yes.
Okay then, right. We have a recommendation in front of us to permit this application. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Kyrle, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Corben. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. I think that's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Item 11 is planning appeals. Now, there was quite a list, but in actual fact, some of them were a bit confusing because it showed they were lodged, and then it also showed the ones that had been dismissed. For example, the monopole at Turnpike Way was dismissed, and a particular one, land to the rear of Sovereign Drive and Procosa Road. And that was appeal against the council's refusal to construction of 106 dwellings, and that was dismissed as well. So thank you to everyone that was concerned in that one. Yes, Councillor House, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that really. I mean, I think it's a very significant appeal decision because unusually it was a site that already had planning permission on appeal in previous times, and then we took the bold step as council by taking the site out of the local plan, even though it got planning permission, because the developer hadn't progressed it in time. And that was a pretty risky thing to do. And there was some words of caution around the room when we did that in terms of the local plan. But it's turned out to be quite justified because we were able to demonstrate we could meet housing supply on better sites and protect the gap between Botley and Hedge. Shame Colin Mercer's not here still. And I hope we'll have the same situation with Satchel Lane when something similar occurs later this year. So I think it's a well done team really for being prepared to stick it out on that one. The smaller one on here, Snakemore, is actually quite important too, because that was potentially opening a wedge to allow more development in the gap between Hedge End and Durley. Shame again Colin's not here, and could have been quite difficult if it had been, because it was one of those applications where an emotive case was being put by the Honourable Louise Cutts to allow permission to be granted. And again, collectively as a council, we toughed it out and said no, and that's the right thing to do. So I think, I hope, we're demonstrating a pretty good record on this stuff, and that's where we're consistent about gaps, where we're consistent about things that are right and consistent about things that are wrong. So, well done, everyone.
Thank you very much, Councillor House, and I think it's good too when people see this, that Eastleigh sometimes gets a very bad press and unwarranted press about building, and I've seen several comments that we do actually refuse applications, and when they go to appeal, that refusal is upheld. So I think that's really good. Thank you very much. Right. In that case then, this now concludes the meeting, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming. And the next meeting at the moment will be held on Monday, the 21st of November at 7 o'clock. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, what's left of it. Thank you.